We're moving on in our program. I'm going to hand over the mantle to the convener of the first plenary for this conference. He's a former president of EASA and a professor of history, Sami culture and societal development. Please welcome Peter Sköld.
Thank you, Bridget, and welcome to the first plenary panel here at the Arctic Congress, People of the North. I'm Peter Sköld. I'm a history professor from Umeå University in Sweden, and I should read carefully for you before we begin. Before we begin our proceedings today, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathered on traditional lands of the Sami people. The Sami, as you know, are the indigenous people of this region whose rich culture, traditions, and history have long been an integral part of these lands. We honor their enduring connection to this place and recognize their ongoing contributions to the cultural fabric of our society. We express our respect for the past, present, and future as we come together in the spirit of learning and collaboration. Let us remain mindful of the importance of these lands to the Sami people and strive to foster a deeper understanding and appreciation of their heritage. Thank you. And I must say, I am so happy that this enormous Arctic Congress has chosen people as the theme for the first plenary. Because people is everything. Sometimes we joke and we say, what is the difference between the Arctic and the Antarctic? Sometimes you get the answer, polar bears. Sometimes you get the answer, people. And I must say, nothing wrong with the Antarctic, but I prefer the Arctic every day in the week due to the people living here. And you know, climate change is a tremendous challenge for the future. But it's people who cause the climate change. And it's people who can do something about the results of the climate change. And that is why we are here, not only to discuss the global warming, but, well, you've all seen the program, so many different aspects of what people do and can do. Capacity building, the green transition, energy supplies, population development, housing, vibrant cultures, legislations, and indigenous rights are only a few examples of this. And as you heard, I have a long history with these organizations behind the Congress. Here in Nord University, the Arctic, and EASA. For more than 25 years, I've been working closely with these organizations, and I'm very happy to see them come together. And I'm very happy to be here, to meet all my old friends and to meet new friends. That's maybe the most important thing we do in these days. And finally, unfortunately, maybe many of you know me as the vinyl collector. And just before leaving Umeå, going here, I thought I should have a goodbye song for myself. So I had two records in my hands. One, which I thought was convenient, with the Arctic Monkeys. But I choose the other one, because the theme is very appealing. It's a song mostly forgotten by a group called Brinsley Swartz in 1974. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? And I hope that sets the tone for our plenary panel here today. And it's my pleasure to present the participants to you.
closer to the table for your books. Yeah.
Do you want the chair?
No, I can be here. It's fine.
Yeah.
So let me see if I have the order correct now. Let me introduce to you Maja Wolland Blomberg, a PhD student from Nord University here in Norway. And we have Bridget Larocque, Inuvik Métis Council, Northwest Territories, Canada. And we have Camilla Olsen, Head of Section for Arctic Cooperation, Ministry of Statehold and Foreign Affairs of the Government of Greenland. And we have representing the scientists, Camilla Brattland, University of Tromsø, Norway. We have Heather Sauyak Jane Kwamboka Gordon, Inupiaq, tribal member of the Nome Eskimo community, and with an affiliation to Sauyak Solutions. And finally, not least, State Secretary Maja Varteressian of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway. And the panelists have been asked to make a short introduction of 5 minutes each, and after that, I hope we have a few remaining minutes for some Q&As. So with that said, I would like Bridget Larocque to start the show.
Okay, thank you and welcome to Bodø. And it's been a long trek here from Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, so almost 2 full days, so a little bit jet lagged and exhausted, but thank you for hosting us here. So we're asked to talk about, I guess, challenges or opportunities or impacts to us in the Arctic and from our perspective. So anything, for everything we're impacted by is everything. So we look at issues from our home perspective holistically. And the biggest impact for us all the time is resource extraction. And now today we're hearing more and more about these critical minerals that yet will be exploited and extracted from our territory. So there's a commission on, what are they calling it, Canada's energy regulator. And there's hope for expansion of Norman Wells in the Sawtooth region in the Northwest Territories, Canada, for further oil exploration and development. So here's a quote from one of the community members from Gashogotene Foundation that oversees the land guardianship in their home community of Fort Good Hope. So Danny Madzazumi states that what his community of Fort Good Hope really want is your cooperation and your responsibility to do your job and to be accountable, and that was to the commission. He would like to see more meaningful consultation from federal regulators. If we could be part of what you're doing on this project and tell our grandchildren how we took care of business, how we made sure we did the job right to protect our environment, our fish, our rabbits, birds, moose, caribou, they all live along the river. And these are our food sources. And if the river is getting polluted by industry upriver, then that flows downriver to Inuvik Northwest Territories, my home community, off the Mackenzie River, and then it flows into the Arctic Ocean. So we're all impacted by what happens upstream and downstream. So those things are really important to us. So when we talk about regulatory regimes, regulations, legislations, acts, all those are created in the south of the Canadian borders and by the state. And all of those are done most times without the inclusion of Indigenous peoples. And it's 2024 and we're still being impacted by this. And we're forced to go to the courts to defend our rights and uphold our rights. And that's not how it should be. As modern day treaties in combination with historical treaties, all those are human rights. And those human rights treaties should be upheld, not only by the state, but everybody that's connected and in partnership and relationship with Indigenous peoples. So this is where we all have a responsibility to protect our lands and our resources and our human rights. And the biggest thing about research and Arctic science is that it should be humanized. We are not talking about a deserted place, an Arctic desert, a place to be conquered or captured. These are our homelands, and that's a message I'd like to leave with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Now I turn to Maja, and please.
Thank you. I have some slides I want to show you as well. Can I get them on?
Well,
should I tap something? If I tap this one? No? This one? No?
Try another one. That's us.
Should I try one more?
Yeah. Yeah, try another.
Yeah? No?
One more.
I'll try one more. Nothing happened.
Oh, you need more?
I need a, this isn't my presentation.
It's the wrong presentation.
That's why we're oral presenting.
I have also prepared a dance for you. No, I'm kidding. This is mine. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Maja Wolland Blomberg, and I am currently working on my PhD doing research on population development in northern Norway. I'm an employee at the High North Center for Business and Governance, one of the big partners of this conference, at Nord University Business School, here in beautiful, sunny, 26-degree Arctic city of Bodø. Today I will talk about my research project, and I also have one more point that I would like to make that I think will be particularly important in the future regarding people in the north, of the north. So the research project I am writing for is this one. It's called In Nord, which aims to find out how we can become more people in northern Norway. This region, like many others, is experiencing an aging population. Young people leave the region, and companies have a hard time recruiting people with relevant competencies. In my research, I want to take a closer look at the Norwegian High North policy. And now I'm switching, so I'm using that button. Yes. The High North is this politically defined area, including northern Norway and in the Barents region, that has traditionally, in a Norwegian context, been used in association with international relations and security politics. For 20 years, the Norwegian government has declared the High North as the most important strategic area of Norway. The different governments has, of course, had slightly different formulations of this, but the message has been the same. And this time also we've seen a rapid growth in the number of national documents dedicated to the High North, which 3 of these are amongst the most important ones, the white papers, while the last one you see is called People, Possibilities, and Norwegian Interests in the North. So what makes this interesting is that while there seems to be an increase in political interest on the topic of population and societal development in northern Norway, there seems to be a little response in the actual population development. So, to put it very simplified, political interest goes up and population continues to go down. So this is the gap I want to study. This is where I want to figure out what has actually been done. And there are many reasons for this, probably, many solutions to this as well. And as many of you know, population and societal development are very complex and very difficult topics. But in a world where we're seeing a growing interest for the High North and Arctic, also outside the Arctic, I think it will be particularly important to communicate the fact that we have societies that also need attention. This is what you get when you Google the Arctic. I think a lot of people think that this is where we live. I've also been working a bit with other regions in the world where many has said that have struggled with something that they've called like a wrong perception of their region based on how mass media is portraying them. And they call this the National Geographic effect. So I was curious to see, maybe we can talk about the National Geographic effect regarding the Arctic as well. I think it's safe to say that you can. And this is not to say that polar bears and ice flakes aren't important, because it is. It is very important and is a huge part of the Arctic. But this indicates that people and societies does not make a very large place in the narrative about the Arctic. So, to conclude, I just want to say also that all of these images are taken in Norway, in the Arctic, in 3 different Arctic cities. So to conclude, to have such ongoing discussions and to have a continuous debate and exchange opinions and ideas about people of the North, I think is essential, because we who live here, we also have a need for fundamental aspects like societal development, knowledge creation, and welfare in our regions. And that is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maja. We have come to scientist Camilla Brattland, and I say your family name also, since we have 2 Camillas in the panel. Welcome.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Peter. And thank you for having me here. I'm happy to represent the scientists from UiT, the Arctic University of Norway, which is the other big university in the northern part of Norway, and it's really an honor to be accepted to Bodø and to the host city of Nord University. I'm saying scientists, and the word science and scientists is perhaps one of the most important words when it comes to research in the Arctic. We are discussing it here at the Arctic Congress. I was happy to participate in some of the sessions this morning where we discussed Arctic science and also particularly the relationship with Indigenous peoples. So I am a social scientist, and my background is in Indigenous studies. And I also have a background in marine biodiversity research, particularly on social sustainability of communities. So to also represent the scientists on the panel and being an Indigenous person, I think perhaps speaks to the development we are seeing now. Somebody said this morning that we are seeing a paradigm shift in Arctic research, and perhaps this is what we are seeing now, a lot of female Indigenous researchers and coming into the stage and taking leadership, perhaps also in the future in research. So I just wanted to say a little bit about one of the questions that Peter posed to us in the panel, the greatest challenges for peoples of the North. So I'm speaking from a Sami community perspective. I'm a coastal Sami person myself from the northern parts of Norway. And as Maja is saying, it's also my experience that our part of the country or the region is characterized by rural and female flight and brain drain. And one of the greatest challenges to rural coastal communities and also indigenous Sami communities is the really persistent and continuing systematic lack of capacity to respond to and take charge of industrial development processes and extractive industries, as Bridget is also pointing to. This pertains to Sami reindeer husbandry, For example, evidenced by how reindeer pastures are eaten up by green energy development or green colonialism, as many call the wind power development projects. These have the potential to threaten the very survival of reindeer herding as a culture and a livelihood that provides income and identity for the Sami culture and communities as a whole. It also pertains to the blue economy. For example, evidenced in the lack of power to reserve important fishing areas and spawning areas for fish close to local settlements from aquaculture development. Most importantly, it pertains to the lack of power to decide over the future in land and marine space. To have a say in whether the space is going to be used for nature conservation and restoration or for economic development purposes. We heard this morning that there is an emphasis on the ocean and the marine space, but this is a space which is full of both potential and conflicts. Norway has opened up for developing mining on the bottom of the sea. It's an emphasis on, or a development of offshore wind power. And as a blue nation looking towards the future, I think this is, of course, it's an important role to take. But we also have the potential to take the role of looking towards how this can be, the blue space can be developed and utilized for the future also without putting Sami cultures at risk, without putting the future of coastal and rural communities at risk. So the global context of biodiversity loss and climate change urges us to look to indigenous ways of managing and protecting resources in a sustainable way. Conserving indigenous lands are among the efforts in focus of the global sustainability and nature conservation goals by 2030. How are we doing on that? Globally and internationally, this may be a goal agreed upon and endorsed by states, but this is not taken seriously and implemented oftentimes in local realities of northern peoples. Perhaps important to emphasize is the difference between northern Norway and other Arctic areas. Compared to my colleagues here and the areas that you are representing across the Arctic, we have infrastructure, a high level of education, especially among women. And this contributes, of course, to the rural flight, but it also has the potential to give back to communities the capacity to deal with extractive industries, processes, with economic development in ways that perhaps have not been tried before. When we think about the global goals that our nation endorses and that we as scientists also endorse, how do they actually apply to the local communities, such as Fosen, we heard about it this morning, Porsanger, Valesnori, Kvænangen, Kvaløya. I could mention many other places where biodiversity conservation and Sami cultural survival is at risk for the sake of green energy development and economic development. How can the two be combined? Should we not make all of our efforts to focus on the possibility of making nature conservation and sustainability possible within the boundaries of a thriving economy, and not at the expense of contributing to already globalized industries which threaten local food systems, food security, and sustainable nature harvest practices? I think the answer to this question is evidenced by our actions. If these places matter less, they do matter less if we act as if they do not matter. And acknowledging that this is the current priority of governments at the local level is perhaps more honest than saying that we support indigenous and local rural futures through endorsing global climate and sustainability goals and not going to walk the talk also at the local community levels. So I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Camilla. And over to you, Camilla. Maja Olsen, sorry.
Olsen, tak.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi again, my name is Camilla Olsen, and I am from Inuvik in Greenland, and I work with the Ministry of Statehood and Foreign Affairs with the government of Greenland. And as Bridget said in the beginning, we were asked to talk about livelihoods in the Arctic, people, which also includes governance. So that's why today I want to talk to you a little bit about the new Greenland Foreign Security and Defense Strategy. It looks like this. So it's our strategy for the coming 10 years, so from 2024 till 2033. And it was finalized in February of 2024, so this year, and it has the title, Greenland in the World, Nothing About Us Without Us. And this is being the Arctic strategy of Greenland. The strategy has been drawn up by the Greenlandic government, but all of the parties of the Greenlandic parliament has been involved in the work, and 4 out of 5 parties signed on to it. The strategy is therefore a testament to the values, culture, goals, and what Greenland stands for, with the following overarching principles. Democracy and human rights are the core of all relationships. Greenland and the Arctic should be an area of low tension. Improving the lives and livelihoods of the Greenlandic people is very important. All relationships takes point of departure in that Greenland and the Greenlandic people is an independent people and nation. All relations must be solution-oriented, and Greenland stands in solidarity and work hard hand in hand with other Arctic communities. The strategy emphasizes that whenever the Arctic is on the agenda in a relevant multilateral forums, Greenland must have a seat at the table, preferably well-placed or as a head of delegation of the Kingdom of Denmark. Many international agendas and political processes take shapes and materializes in multilateral organizations and within the broader international cooperation. Greenland is already contributing to and will continue to enrich international debates with its unique perspective. With our knowledge of our own country and the Arctic, Greenland can influence the path of future developments. The strategy states that it remains important to maintain the Arctic Council as the most important forum for cooperation in the Arctic, as it serves as one of the primary forums for international cooperation in the Arctic, allowing us to collaborate on crucial issues that directly impact our communities, environment, and future. The Arctic Council is unique in its ability to seek to bring together Arctic states and indigenous peoples. And it's providing a platform and dialogue in decision-making and joint action. This forum is essential for us to address the shared challenges and opportunities that come with being a part of the Arctic region. The strategy also states that Greenland being the Arctic part of the Kingdom of Denmark, we should have a leading role within the Arctic Council. According to the strategy, our government must intensify their efforts to represent Greenland in areas where we have full jurisdiction. This includes contributing a Greenlandic voice and perspective to international Arctic cooperation. It is essential that the chairship of the Arctic Council is exercised by and from the Arctic, reinforcing the notion that Arctic issues should be addressed by those who experience them firsthand. The strategy highlights the importance of keeping Arctic as a low-tense area. We hope to maintain this focus without being too naive in the light of movements of other powers. Additionally, we place a high focus on ensuring that our supply and communication lines are both resilient and secure. The strategy aims to make the Arctic Council more relevant and inclusive for the peoples of the Arctic. We are committed to fostering a cohesive Arctic through business partnerships, cultural exchanges, and collaboration on food security. Our goal is to enhance connectivity among indigenous peoples, driven by the ambition to develop new areas of activity that positively impact the Arctic, and especially for the youth. The strategy outlines Greenland's intention to explore the possibility of establishing a developing and collaboration primarily between the governments and parliaments of Alaska, the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, Nunavik, and Greenland. This forum would serve as a platform to meet and discuss challenges, developments, and solutions. The more we reach out to our neighbors to the west, the more apparent it becomes that despite our differences, the diverse North American region faces many of the same challenges and opportunities that we do. We are all located in the Arctic region with largely similar climates and coastlines along the Arctic Ocean. In these challenging times for the Arctic, the strategy highlights the importance of expanding cooperation in meaningful ways. It is essential that all players in the region are involved in discussing issues particularly relevant to the Arctic, including climate change, changes in snow and ice conditions, and environmental and life-wild changes. These challenges lead to infrastructural issues such as housing and road damage from melting permafrost, as well as social issues, healthcare problems, educational challenges, and new migration routes for our animals that are vital to our communities. However, the strategy also identifies significant potentials in the mining sector, renewable energy, research, and education, as long as tourism, culture and arts, sports, and transportation. And additionally, there is a potential in exploring a more free movement of mining workers between our countries. The strategy asserts the value of decision makers in the Arctic discussing these issues together. Much like Greenland's participation in the Nordic Council, we will work towards developing an Arctic North American forum that can involve inter-regional, intergovernmental collaborative body, where we all come from the Arctic, and in many ways our challenges and opportunities for development are very similar.
Thank you, Camilla. I now give the word to Heather Gordon, please.
All right. Thank you. Okay, let's try the slides. It's okay if they don't come up, but I'd like to share. So I'll just start a little bit about myself. My name is Heather Soyak Gordon. My Nupyak name is Soyak, and my Kisi name, I married into an African Kenyan Kisi family, is Kwamboka, meaning crossing two bridges or cultural. That's not it. Or between two cultures. I really thank you all for hosting me, and I'm very humbled to join these other women on stage as well. And I wanted to share just a little bit today about what I've learned over my life as an Indigenous person from other Indigenous people. Being in Nupyak, green one? Oh, that is much better. Okay, so I just want to share some of the learnings I've had over my life with you all about why the things that everybody has said matter so much to us. And I want to really convey that to you, how important and why how sometimes when we explain our stories and our lives, people think of us as just telling a story, when really it's sharing a profound scientific perspective. These are all scientists on the stage, and I am a scientist as well. So, thank you. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Indigenous kinship and what that means. Indigenous kinship extends beyond humans. It extends to non-human kin. It extends to the animals, the plants, the waters, the rivers. This isn't just an Alaskan concept. This is pretty much a very shared Indigenous concept around the world from different places. And I just want to explain that humans are only one aspect of the ecosystem. And so when we're talking about health and well-being of the Arctic environment, it's not just humans, it's not just the ice, it's a whole system that has to work together. Honestly, mainstream science is still building capacity. Indigenous peoples have capacity because we have thousands of years of knowledge that has been passed down. Mainstream science is still working on catching up to us. There's been just years of destruction and raping of the earth. And I think that, it's time to start listening to Indigenous people and our sustainable way of life. I want to show that the anthropogenic perspective is very human-based. The earth is here for the humans. Humans are above other species, other ways of life, other plants and animals. Then we get to this ecocentric perspective, which is conservation issues. We heard it talked about today. The land was protected, and then Indigenous people in this area can't hunt reindeer or have their normal way of life, their subsistence or sustaining way of life. And so all of these principles do not touch on the Indigenous concept of the world, which is a kin-centric, relational worldview where humans are a part of the ecosystem, not above it. And just as animals and the earth provides for us, it's our responsibility to care for the earth in a way that it can continue to provide. And it's a reciprocal relationship that involves agency on behalf of all, and recognizing all of these aspects as having life and sentience and being. This is what happens when we get more and more separated from the environment. These are problematic issues. We heard today that, if the way things go, we might not have reindeer herding here. Where I'm from, we do a lot with salmon, and this is trolling, where they scrape the bottom of the ocean, and they get everything else except, they're going for pollock, but they've got all kinds of other stuff in there. It's massively hurting the salmon in Alaska, which, are trying to travel up all the way into Canada, so it's hurting Indigenous peoples all the way across. However, in Alaska, we don't have the state talking to the federal, talking to the tribes, and engaging in this co-management system that needs to be happening, with Indigenous people not just having a seat at the table, but having the seat at the head of the table, having that leadership in land management. Indigenous approaches are the most sustainable. There's scientific data on that. If it requires statistics and graphs, here they are. We have statistics and graphs. And this is a kin-centric approach to protecting the environment. The most biodiversity is in Indigenous areas, which has just the smallest Indigenous people due to mass genocide and colonization that's happened to most of our populations. There's many different Indigenous peoples in the US that have this shared belief of the 7 generations thinking. So my role today, my ancestors many generations ago set the world up so that I could be here today, cared for the world so that I could eat salmon, created this space so I could grow up reindeer herding actually in Alaska. And now it's my honor and responsibility to create that space for the next 7 generations. And if you have that perspective, you're thinking about 1,600 years instead of the next 10 years of natural gas. That's going to run out. And I think that's all I have, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. And then last but not least, State Secretary Maja Varteressian. Please.
Thank you. And I have to say, what an honor to be on a panel with so much passion, experience, and knowledge about the Arctic and Arctic life. Ladies and gentlemen, friends of the Arctic, the key importance of the Arctic and the Norwegian High North has been stated in speeches, governmental white papers, and strategies for many, many times, and for good reason. Norway is an Arctic nation with a large percentage of our population living above the Arctic Circle. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks earlier, the Arctic and how it is perceived, well, it's really based on the perspectives that color and shape the lenses we're looking through. Broadly speaking, and some of my co-panelists have already touched upon this subject, we can divide the discourse about the Arctic, outside of the Arctic, in two narratives. Well, the first one is focusing on security politics, great power, rivalry, flags being planted on the bottom of the ocean, and a scramble, a race for Arctic resources. While the other highlights a beautiful icy wilderness, climate change, vulnerable ecosystems, and the need for strict conservation. What is perhaps less known, though, and certainly less spoken about, is the fact that the Arctic is also home to 2 million people across 3 continents, many of whom live here in Norwegian cities, towns, and hamlets. And so ensuring that people in the North live good, safe, and meaningful lives, it's really essential for our national security, for our national core interests, and for many reasons. So let's be honest. When we speak about the people in the North, it's not just because their welfare matters, because it really does, but it's also crucial for safeguarding core national interests. It's about defending the prospects of Arctic youth to grow up in free, safe, and democratic societies. Now, Russia's senseless war on Ukraine impacts our security interests not only through geographical proximity, but also by threatening international law and fundamental values, the very building blocks of our security and our societies. So in many cases, people living in the high north, in regions close to the Russian border, who were in contact with Russian institutions, well, they were the first to see the development in Russia. An ever tighter civic space, limits of fundamental freedoms, and limits to democracy. Russia's war on Ukraine makes our geopolitical environment more unpredictable and dangerous. Our responsibility is to manage our security as we have before, with Europe, with partners, and with our allies. The strengthening of Norwegian defense capabilities in the years to come will give impetus to many communities of the North, including by developing connections and cooperation with our new NATO allies, Sweden and Finland. It matters that people are living in the North. Friends, we all know the value of the Arctic Council. Through its unique structure, it is the premier platform for cooperation and communication about the interests of the Arctic people. And that dimension, people, is why Norway as chair is working so hard to make sure that the Council survives. People in the North share many commonalities. They often live in small communities and have access to their natural resources in ways that big city dwellers can only dream about. They see possibilities rather than difficulties, and they're not easily discouraged. At the same time, the challenges of the North, they are real. Harsh climate for large parts of the year, vast geographical distances, sparse transportation networks, and distance to capital cities in the south. The demographic developments in many small coastal communities are a real concern, and we must have an honest discussion about this. Friends, when it all comes to all, it's really all about the youth. Because young people must confidently be able to seek their future here in the Arctic. It is a question of economy, education, culture, social services, and social life. That is why early next year, we, as chair, will host an Arctic Council conference devoted to the youth. We consider this as one of the most important deliveries as chair in our period. We have partnered with a number of youth organizations to ensure that we get relevant input on the issues which we should give special attention to. So, friends, I would love to get some initial inputs from you already now. I might be the one on the panel, but you are the ones with the answers and the ideas, so I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Maria. We have 20 minutes remaining for some questions, and I've had suggestions from the panelists. I've added a few questions myself, and the list is, of course, absolutely too long to go through in 20 minutes. And even more so, I decided to add a question you have not seen. What brings people together? What is the symbol of sharing? What is so delicious?
Food.
Food. So my question to you, very briefly, which is your favorite northern food?
Caribou.
I can't decide. Whale.
Salmon.
All right.
Easy.
Cod. When I was in Greenland, narwhal skin.
Cod here as well.
Fair enough. I added the Swedish fermented herring to that. I actually love it. But let's hear. I mean, your presentations have been so good, and you have dealt with the challenges we have in the Arctic. But I still would like to know if there is any one of you who would like to add anything to these challenges. Which are the major challenges of the Arctic? Because we need to prioritize. Thumbs up for anyone who wants to respond, please.
The bureaucracy of a state power, disrespecting Indigenous people's rights and Indigenous people's lands. And this isn't only about colonialism, but it's still prevalent today with extraction of resources for global interest, global demand, not what we need, not what we would like to see. The other thing is, our resources mean something to us. They're just not natural resources. They're just not resources for extraction. A lot of the resources that we know and are termed under are food sources, our ceremonial sources, and our health resources. So these all come from our land. And without that, we lose a whole lot of our culture, which evolves anyway, but we still maintain what is really deeply rooted in our DNA. So those things, it's the bureaucracy, the lack of political will. Politicians' terms are only 4 years. You lack systemic political will. You lack systemic governance with partnering with Indigenous peoples. And those are the biggest. That's the biggest threat for us in the Northwest Territories and throughout Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Heather?
It was perfect what you said. I was just primed up to say the next thing. So, yeah, I would build on that in that some of the reasons that we're unable to speak together at the table, or there's a lack of recognition for Indigenous rights. In my perspective, is that it's not just different ways of seeing the world, it's an entire different framework you grow up in. And I tried to share in 5 minutes some pictures that might help conceptualize understanding the world as not a natural resource, but as kin. That is the main primary difference. If the continued view of the world is that it's a resource for human extraction, whether it's food, timber, fine minerals, all of those things. If it's continually viewed as something for extraction, and then we're just not going to have, listening to Indigenous people, or we're not going to have any sustainability. Constant extraction is not sustainable. they just, the Alaska switched to natural gas, and the area my mom lives, Kenai Peninsula, 10 years ago, it was this big thing, we'll have natural gas forever, and it's gonna run out in 2 years, and then we're gonna have a year of no natural gas until they figure out how to import it from Asia, they said. So this is just a simple example of where, you know, these ideas of a resource and this taking ends up not working out and not being sustainable, even in an energy sector. And so I just want to really emphasize the great importance of thinking about different parts of the world as not just a resource for taking or using. You know, if you were to think of like your family member, do you think of them as someone you take from, that you use them to accomplish your goals? Did you not care when someone passed from COVID? These are all the ways that we see the natural world, as literal kin. So if you can think of those concepts with human beings in your family, can you adapt those concepts and understand how it might work with the natural world?
Thank you, Heather. Over the past decades, we have had a few leading buzzwords for society development, for science, and sustainability has, of course, been one of them, very important one. But appearing in the last years is another buzzword, security. And many people, when you mention security, think naturally of military security, defense security. But if I say human security, how do you interpret that?
Well, isn't it about the same thing? Human security.
Isn't it broader?
Well, you know, it's really to have people living in the north is about securities. You need to ensure that people have the social services, the framework they need to live their lives in a meaningful and safe way, in a broad sense. And in order to make sure that security is there, you need people to ensure that the security is there, both in the traditional and the non-traditional sense. So it's really the way you look at what security is. I think we need to in terms of the Arctic, broaden our perspective on the term security in itself. Because the lack of adaptation to climate change, that threatens our security. Of course, lack of adaptation to the geopolitical situation, it also threatens our security. Lack of cooperation across borders in order to tackle the next pandemic, when that will unfortunately come, that threatens our security. But at the very core of all of that, it's people being able to live safe and meaningful lives. And that's, I think, the most important thing when focusing on the development of the new high north policy of Norway, having people living meaningful lives in robust societies at the center.
Good, thank you. I saw Maja's hand.
Yes. Completely agree, of course, but I also wanted to add that, you know, the fact that people, or the security aspect and how important people are for national security is actually what makes the population challenge in northern Norway a national concern. And because we also have, in addition to the High North policy that I am studying, we also have a district policy. So we have the Ministry of Regional Development, which, you know, takes care of the regions, but we also have a High North policy. And so to have population development and societal development included and as a strong part of this High North policy, I think is of huge importance for national security, because it is regarded as the most important strategic area of Norway.
Thank you. Indigenous rights and self-governance are important considerations in northern governance structures. How can governments better support indigenous-led initiatives and ensure meaningful collaboration and consultation? And I would especially like to hear if any one of our Camillas has an answer to this.
Yeah, well, I can start. Yeah. So indigenous-led initiatives. Well, we already have some great examples and good examples of indigenous leadership, such as the Sami parliaments, the non-governmental Sami council, which already take good leadership roles and also have taken Sami representation through a global indigenous forum, such as the Arctic Caucus in the UN Permanent Forum, through the permanent participants in the Arctic Council. However, the main difference between Sami and many other indigenous peoples, I think, is the lack of recognition of territory and land rights. And this means that although the Sami parliaments, for instance, can show indigenous leadership at the national and regional level towards the nation states, there is a lack of possibilities for indigenous-led initiatives when there is no legitimate Sami territorial unit from which to lead and represent such initiatives, such as conservation and harvest rules for salmon or the restoration of local fish stocks through preserving marine space. So there is that lack of territorial base kind of is the main difference when it comes to how indigenous leadership or indigenous-led initiatives look like when you compare across the Arctic. Yeah.
Thank you. Would you like to add something, Camilla?
I think I agree of what you say, and I think what's the difference with our governmental structure is that we are a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but in Greenland we do. Greenland and the Faroe Islands have their own government, but we are not. What's the word?
Dictated to.
Yeah, no, but I mean we don't have the indigenous people's rights, as we are not an indigenous peoples of the Kingdom of Denmark or Denmark per se, because we are two different people, and so I mean we do have Greenlandic people in the government, and we are our own people, but we are not written in the law as indigenous peoples, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I think I will leave it at that.
Good. You want to add something, Camilla?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this because it's interesting from the Sami perspective about the rights recognition, because there is, for instance, a recognition of Sami fishing rights, for instance, in general within a certain territory or administrative territorial area in Norway, but that right, the fishing right, is not limited to Sami people. It's extended to all who lives within that certain territory, and I wonder if that's the same kind of conceptual thinking about that. There is a recognition of indigenous rights, but the right also extends to those who are settled within the territory or within the same region of the indigenous peoples, because it's in our context it's many times very hard to put, and we don't want to put boundaries between ethnical boundaries between ourselves and our neighbors, which we have relations which through hundreds, thousands of years. So it's also a matter of kind of being inclusive of not only or extending that right also to others who we co-inhabited the territories with.
So,
no, go on,
okay.
Please.
Sorry. Okay. So fishing and hunting in this area is within the Greenlandic jurisdiction, but it's the way we get. So we don't have land claims and these kind of things, but we do have. So it's to put it simple, if you need a license to go fishing, then you just need to be need to have an address in Greenland. So it's not based on ethnicity, but it's based on where you live.
Did you have a brief comment, Heather?
I just wanted to add a little of the Alaska context. Alaska has federal land and state land and some indigenous land, but most of the land is managed by the federal and state government. And if you're on state land, there's no preference. Subsistence, that's what we call it, hunting and fishing, is allowed by all state residents. So you can imagine that causes some overuse. And then on federal lands, there was a strong push to have an indigenous preference, but there was a much stronger push to not. So we have a rural preference on federal lands, which considers if there's a shortage, then it should go to the rural people in the area, similar to what you said.
Thank you. Let's spend a couple of minutes on the concept of cooperation. I was a rather young researcher when the Arctic countries opened the doors for Russian researchers and students to come to our universities and start collaborating. And it was great years, really, full of enthusiasm, full of results and changes in a positive way. I'm so sad that those days have changed and are behind us. Maybe, Maria, you could comment on this change, but for all of you, we need to continue to cooperate. And what ways of cooperation would have the greatest impact on people's daily lives?
That's a big question, an important one. To start off with the geopolitical backdrop, there is one country that can end the situation we're currently in terms of a war being waged in Europe, and that is Russia. It can stop its illegal aggression on Ukraine. If we go back 30 years in time, approximately 34, even to when the Berlin Wall fell, it was a symbol of openness, of togetherness, of belief in closer cooperation, in multilateralism. And it inspired a lot of cooperation. It inspired the Barents cooperation. It inspired the Arctic Council being formed. And this people-to-people togetherness, this cultural exchange, it has been of such a great value to the sense of togetherness in the high north, both in a circumpolar sense, but also in this regional sense, and that is very much what is under pressure. We thought after the Berlin Wall fell that it would be possible to get Russia to join our value club. For a long time we believed it would be possible. Now we've been proven wrong. But it doesn't mean that at some time in the future it won't return to being possible to collaborate again. But just right now, what is dividing us is values. Values of freedom, democracy on one side, and authoritarian values on the other side. And in terms of this geopolitical context with globalization in reverse, regionalization, less trust, less cooperation, we need to do two things at the same time. One, we need to do everything we can to make sure that the multilateral system, such as the Arctic Council is a perfect example of, continues to function, because we really need it. If the Arctic Council collapses, we lose the most important fora to communicate and cooperate about the core values of the Arctic people, Arctic culture. And at the same time, we need to adapt to the world the way it is. And that is a world where regions matter more. What we do in our regions matters even more. It means that now and in the years to come, we need to stand more closer together with countries we share values with. Our allies and our partners.
Very good. Bridget, a short comment. We are running out of time.
Always running out of time. But the thing about the Arctic Council is that the Arctic Council has to value its indigenous peoples as well. Yes. I helped create this Arctic Council, but it was the indigenous peoples of Greenland, the Sami Council, and the Russian Association of Indigenous Peoples of the Far North that were influential in creating the Arctic Environmental Protection Strategy, which helped form the Arctic Council. So we have to remember that history as well, that the Indigenous peoples have always been influencers in keeping dialogue and values open. And I think this is where we have to remember that through science, we can continue to do good work for Indigenous peoples with their own voices as scientists in the work that needs to be done, that we combat climate change and conflict and really bring science diplomacy where it belongs in research.
Yes.
Thank you, Bridget. Such wise words to end the panel with. And much better than my intention, you know, standing here, I just have the notion of Britain Got Talent. And I thought maybe if I start to sing, you will all burst out into tears. It will not happen, I know that. So instead I turn to our excellent panel, and I want to say a warm thank you for your contributions to this discussion. It has been marvelous and important.
Thank you.
People to people, thank you.
Thank you.
And with that,